We're good.
Excellent.
Cool.
Hey, Max. How are you, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing
Hey,
good, Andy. How are you?
I'm doing great. Great. So Max, why don't you introduce yourself? I'll introduce
Yeah.
myself, and then we'll jump right into some interesting things for everybody.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So, first off, hey, everybody. My name is Max. I am a product trainer or facilitator on HubSpot's learning and development team. Been on HubSpot, or I've been at HubSpot for it's it's going to be 5 years in December, which is kind of nuts. But before I was doing training for HubSpot's new employees, I was an implementation specialist. So I got to spend a lot of good time with customers, really diving into HubSpot, learning the tool from front to back, and getting people on board with an inbound strategy. And also, as things kind of shifted over time and HubSpot evolved into a CRM, we did a lot of sales stuff too as well, right? So, and I think that's what we're going to be talking about today. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm Andy Steuer. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Right For Me. And Right For Me, what we do is we build content teams for our clients so that our clients can successfully have a content marketing effort, delivering useful content to their buyers and prospects, and attract and convert leads better. Max and I have been doing these conversations now for several conversations, Max, so
Yeah.
love these calls. And today what we're going to dig into is pipeline, how to build a pipeline in HubSpot.
Mm-hmm.
I always find this interesting because you have so many different channels that leads come through. And what I think we want to showcase here is, how do I track the performance of each one of those channels?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if I've got leads coming in through organic traffic or AdWords, Facebook, LinkedIn, email outreach, number of these different channels, I want to track the performance of each one of those channels, and looking at my deal board and how I might set that up, and what kind of reporting what that would look like. How do I do that? What are some best practices?
Yeah. And the other thing too, it's one thing to just look at those channels from like your more, I hate saying funnel, but more top of the funnel efforts in terms of just driving a lot more traffic and getting a lot more eyeballs onto your site. It's a totally different thing to then say, okay, yeah, we're getting all this traffic, but how well is it actually converting into a lead, and how much of that traffic is actually converting into an actual customer? Like, how do we track that, and how do we make it easy? What's cool about HubSpot is that if you're using the HubSpot CRM, or even if you're using Salesforce, for example, which has a beautiful sync between the two tools, you can track all that stuff out of the box, which is great. So what I was thinking, we'll hop into HubSpot. We'll show you how to set up your pipeline the first time. We'll do a very like kind of basic setup. We'll talk about deal stages, things like that. And then we'll actually go and revisit the traffic analytics tool and show you where customers are actually going to be showing up once these deals start getting closed by your sales team, right? So we'll start a little bit with the pipeline. We'll show you what that looks like, show you how to edit your deal stages, and then we'll kind of say like, hey, you close a customer. How's that going to reflect in your reporting, at least from a traffic perspective, right? So why don't I share my screen here? Boom, boom. All right, you can see my screen, Andy?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. So before maybe we even get like kind of started and showing people in the tool, Andy, like what are some of the things like you run across with customers when they're first setting up HubSpot and first starting to think about how they're managing their sales process in the CRM? Like what sort of advice do you kind of give them before they start diving in to like things like deal stages and stuff? And I'll let you talk about that for a second while I sort of navigate and get us ready to go.
Yeah, so a lot of this stuff can be overwhelming, and especially when you have leads coming in through these different channels, tracking the performance of those channels becomes really important. And to your point, tracking not only the leads, but the conversions, because what that'll tell you is where you want to double down, where you want to put more gas behind, and where you want to optimize your budget and your time. Having metrics around each one of these channels is super important. So identifying what are the channels where your traffic's coming from, where the leads are coming from, and then looking at the full conversion path. What leads are coming in, sales qualified leads to marketing qualified leads to a close. What does that whole process look like? And with attribution to each channel. So I
Yeah.
think that's the initial hard part. And what we recommend is first, let's just, very simply, let's get a spreadsheet out, identify what are the channels that you have leads coming in from. Let's name them, and then let's talk about the deal stages that you have. We have clients, for example, that are e-commerce companies. They have a very different kind of sales funnel process than a SaaS company would, where they have maybe a demo in the
Sure.
mix and what that might look like.
Yeah.
So yeah, so let's talk a little bit about how we help
Yeah.
people who are looking at this.
And, and this is always something that I like to visit with people when they're first getting started with HubSpot, because like what I always tell people is like, when you're first getting started with the tool, the last thing you want to do is completely reinvent the wheel and adopt a brand new piece of software at the same
Yes.
exact time.
Yeah,
Right?
it's overwhelming.
It's tough, right? And you're just setting yourself up for failure when you do that. So, when you're getting your sales team acclimated with HubSpot, yeah, maybe the way they do things like currently isn't the most efficient way in the world, but step one, you got to get them comfortable with this new environment first before you say, all right, here's a new software environment for you to work in, but also here's a completely new strategy that we're following. Adopt both at the same time. So I
Mm-hmm.
typically, like when I would work with customers, I would show them how to set these deal stages up based on what their current sales process looked like. Because if you can adopt their current process into the new piece of software, that's something familiar to them, right? And they're going to be able to kind of jump in and continue doing the job the way that they've been doing it, instead of trying to do a fundamental shift in their day-to-day plus adopt a new piece of software at the same time. It's super tough. So the deals tool basically lets you set up these different things called deal stages. Now, before I show you how to edit these deal stages, let me show you where deal stages actually manifest themselves within HubSpot. Where do you see this? What does it actually do? So on and so forth. So I'm going to actually go back up to the top of the page. I'm going to go to sales and I'm going to go to deals. All right. So we're going to let this board load up. Now, when you see deals, deals are basically an object inside of HubSpot that represents a potential sale to someone, right? Just like a contact represents a human, a company represents a company, a ticket represents, you helping someone with something. A deal represents you selling something to someone, either potentially or some sort of closed deal or a lost deal. So this is the deals board, and this board shows you all the different open deals that you have with all of your potential customers, as well as ones that you've closed. You'll notice up here at the top, you have a whole bunch of different options to view different sets of deals based on different sets of criteria. You can set custom filters. So for example, if you only want to see deals that belong to a certain sales rep, you can do that. If you want to see deals that close within a certain time frame, you can do that. But what you'll notice is when you're on this deals page and you click this little button on the top left that has like these 9 dots right here, this is going to bring you to the deals table. And what the deals table lets you do is organize all these different deals that you have by the stage that they're in. So think of a deal stage as a milestone in your sales process, right? It's sort of the next step that you're waiting to happen. All right. So I'm going to actually go and look at this deal I have here. It's just called test. Nothing.
One thing on that, Sam, Max, that I want to mention is that what we like to do is put those deal stages in order of activities that have already happened, right?
Yeah.
So that's an important thing, right? They've already met the criteria for that stage, rather than saying they're going into the next stage because they haven't met the criteria of that stage yet. So have they filled out a form? Have they had a qualified sales call? Have they whatever the next stages are?
Yeah. The reason I brought it up the way that I did is I've seen lots of customers when they're building out their deal stages put these little like micro actions that the deal has no business just like sitting there. So for example, right, what I've seen people do is they say, all right, we have a stage called like demo scheduled, demo complete, and like I guess scoping call scheduled, right? So like, let's say you have like 3 of those in there. And what
Right.
happens is they go, okay, well, if you have the demo call and then schedule the scoping call, like whatever it may be,
Right.
on that demo call, then that middle stage of demo call complete has no value, right? So the only it sounded like we disagreed there, but it's actually, we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
The thing is, you don't want to have any stages in there that you wouldn't be like sitting in for a little bit, right? You wouldn't want to have this just micro stage that you skip over and like don't even really have a reason, because then you're just clicking extra buttons. So be careful of that. And when we go through like setting up the different deal stages, you'll see exactly what we're talking about here.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
We said the same thing, just kind of in different ways.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is when you're looking at a deal, on the left-hand side, you'll see this little stage thing here, right? And you'll see all your different deal stages, as well as this little graphic that will show you how far along the process that this deal actually is. So you get a little visual representation, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to setting up the pipeline, we got to remember, not every single business is going to be following the same exact sales process. In fact, I'd wager almost every business has a different sales process, because your product's different. Your experience that you're providing is different. Your sales maneuvers can vary, right? There's all these different things that could cause your sales process to be different. And you want to make sure that the deal stages in HubSpot reflect that, right? So let's actually go and edit these and change these deal stages. So to change your deal stages or edit or adjust your deal stages in HubSpot, you're going to go to this little gear icon in the top right-hand corner. And then on the left, this automatically went to it because I was already on that page. But if you're not already on the deals page, when you click that, on the left-hand side of your settings, if you scroll down, there's this sales drop down that you can click. And then there's one that says deals, and that will bring you here. All right. So this is going to show you all of the different deal stages that you have set up. And this is how your pipeline basically gets organized within HubSpot. When you first get started with HubSpot, these are the deal stages that are in there by default, right? Appointment scheduled, qualified to buy, presentation scheduled, decision maker bought in, contract sent, close won, close lost, right? Yep. This obviously isn't everyone's sales process, right? So Andy, walk me through when you sit down with a customer here for the first time, right? How are you sort of advising how they take their sales process and translate it into deal stages?
We do exactly what you're doing here. We typically do it in Excel just so that we can make it easily editable. And we start there, but the idea is that we say, okay, so let's talk about the very first touch that you have with a prospect. Mm-hmm. How do they find you? Yep. Could be an email that they received, could be an ad that they saw, could be an organic link that they found you on and came to your website and maybe filled out a form. So yep. We start from there, from that process, and then we step through their sales cycle. So exactly what you're saying. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's mirror what your sales process is. And we get into the details of it. We just unpack it. And then cool. From there, we consolidate any of the steps that you mentioned so that we don't have a lot of steps. We have the meaningful milestones along the way that are going to carry through so that they can identify how qualified that prospect is and how likely they are to close based on what stages they are in the sales process. And mm-hmm. Then also think a little bit about what the appropriate messaging might be at each one of those stages to really help them kind of crystallize what are the right stages that they should think about that they can enter here in their deal board. And then from there, then we get these finite sets of stages within the deal process, and we put it into HubSpot, and then we build it out.
Yeah. So why don't we go through setting one up here, and we can use some sort of fictitious business, or maybe we can even like mirror yours or something like that. We'll figure it out here. But what I would usually recommend people do to start with, right, is when you're faced with these, what is it, 7? Yes, these 7 default ones. Generally, I recommend deleting all of them except for close won and close lost, because kind of everyone's going to have a close won and close lost. You either won the business and you closed the deal, or you didn't, right? So it makes sense to kind of keep those ones in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and delete all these ones up at the top. We'll move this one to close lost. what you just saw there is HubSpot noticed that there was an open deal that was in that stage.
All
and
right.
basically said, oh, what do you want to do with that one? Which one do you want to move it to? So
Yeah.
HubSpot's looking out for you in that case. So I'm going to delete all these and we're going to start with nothing, right?
All right.
So I'm going to add our first deal stage here, right? And this is going to be sort of like our opening, original starting point for your deal stage. Now, this is something you want to think critically about in terms of when are you actually opening up a deal, right? Because you don't want to just be opening up deals willy-nilly inside of HubSpot, because that can have some pretty like chaotic negative effects on the way you report the way you measure the performance of your salespeople, right? Depending on like what sort of metrics and KPIs for your sales team that your team values, right? And what your sales people's performance is sort of based on or measured upon. You want to just like think critically about like how you're setting these up and when deals get created. So like, I want to hear your thoughts on this, Andy. For me, generally what I say is like, okay, what is the point in the process where you think a customer is like serious about actually having a conversation about purchasing something from you, right? For me, the kind of the default that I always go to is like when you get that first call on the books, right? So not necessarily when someone fills out a form saying, I want to schedule a demo or I want to talk to someone, but like once you've had that first conversation or you've reached out a little bit and they've scheduled that next call with you, right?
Yeah.
So like what I'd say is like, I'm going to use very generic terms here, right? But we'll just call this like intro call booked, right? So maybe you've had a conversation with the customer over email or briefly via phone once you've gotten in touch with them, and they're like, yeah, I'd like to have a conversation. I'd like to, dig deeper into this. I'd like to open up the discussion around buying something, whatever it may be. That way, there's some sort of interest and intent there, right?
So until then, they're just a contact, right? That's how you're thinking about it. And what's interesting about that is that you're not getting the deal board messy with unqualified opportunities.
Yes. And I harp on this because one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen customers make is immediately deciding, oh, hey, we've got access to all this like automation and the workflows tool inside of HubSpot. Wouldn't it be great if every single time someone filled out a form to talk to one of our sales reps, we automatically generated a lead or automatically generated a deal so we can cut back on all the manual work it takes to put together a deal.
Right.
While that sounds enticing, right? What's tough about that situation is when you have like a lot of traffic coming to your site and a lot of people filling out those forms because they think they want to talk to a sales rep, you're going to have a ton of people who shouldn't have filled that form out in the first place, right? In the world of sales, it's all a numbers game, right? You get a lot of people that say they want to talk to you, but then, it's still only a small amount of those folks that actually follow through with it, right? So the problem with automatically opening up deals through workflows in HubSpot is that your close win ratio or close win rate of your deals for your sales reps is kind of at the whim of the people who just book meetings or book calls or request certain things from your sales team on your site, right? You may have someone go and fill out a form because they think that's what they need, but like they were never qualified to begin with, or maybe they just never even pick up or get cold feet or not even want to talk to you or buy something else. And then all of a sudden you're going to see the close win ratio of your sales reps plummet because all these deals are getting opened in the first place when they never should have been. Right.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So
it puts all this negative inertia on your sales guys when actually you want to support your sales guys and help them increase their close rate. Yeah.
I've always been in the school of thought that a deal getting opened should be a manual process. And when I say manual, I don't mean you have to fill everything out manually. There's still ways that you can leverage workflows to auto-generate a bunch of information and cut down on the amount of typing you have to do to open these. But the deal getting created, to me, should always be a conscious decision that a sales rep makes when there is some sort of percentage chance that you could close business with someone, right?
It's an event. Yeah, it's an event. You're thinking about this like, okay, this is an opportunity now. I will
it's a judgment call. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Totally. So whatever that first thing is that you're going to do and you're waiting for it to happen, that's generally what I recommend setting as your first deal stage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then this is where like it really kind of gets dependent on what your actual process looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
So after you add that first one in there, you can keep adding these deal stages and you can kind of move them in. So for example, what would you if this was a sales process that had like an intro call and then they had to for example, I don't want to say get the decision makers bought in because that's one of the original ones that's in there. If we're talking about that like second step in the process, maybe they're presenting a solution, right?
Yeah, let's call it a demo because, did you
Yep.
give a demo? Because sometimes the intro call can be a meet and greet and you're just getting to know each other to see if there's a fit
For sure.
and whether you should have the next call. So
Yeah.
that next call can be the demo.
Yep. So for example, we've got like demo booked here, right?
Yeah.
So now what you want to start thinking about as you start to add in more of these bits of your sales process is when a person kind of continues through your sales process, the likelihood that they're going to buy does go up because they're not completely thrown off and they give up on the first call, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what you want to start thinking about over here on the right is this thing called win probability. All right. Now, what win probability is going to do is it's going to help you forecast your revenue. All right. One of the properties on deals is obviously deal stages, which is what we're talking about here. But there's also a property called amount. And amount is basically the dollar amount of that sale, right? What you could potentially close if you were able to win this deal.
Mm-hmm.
When you're looking at your sales reporting in HubSpot, it looks at that dollar amount, and then it also looks at whatever you're forecasting the close date to be, right? So when you build a deal, you have the stage, you have the dollar amount, so how much it's actually going to be if you actually sell that thing to that person. But then you also have like a prospective close date. When do you think the business is going to be closed by?
Yep.
When you look at your revenue forecasting reports in HubSpot, the way that HubSpot forecasts that revenue is it looks at the deal close date. So what day is this supposed to close? It then looks at the amount that the deal is worth. And then it looks at the win probability here to say, hey, well, you may close this much revenue within this time frame, right? So if this was a deal for $1,000, right, and it was set to close in September, and we had this deal in this demo booked stage, but it's set to close in December, it's going to show that as $300 worth of forecasted revenue for whatever time frame that you're looking at for September, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just think critically about how likely someone is to close if they get to these certain stages. And this is something that involves like trial and error and playing around with. I don't expect anyone to get this right the very first time. You may already have some win probability calculated from like your previous sales process that you want to build into here. I wouldn't bang your head over the table about it though. All right. It's something that you're going to kind of iterate over time. Andy, what sort of thoughts do you have on probability?
I would say keep your probability low until you have qualified that who the buyer is, who the actual decision maker is for the budget. For sure. And you've talked about price.
Yep.
Right. And you've qualified them. You have to do that because if you haven't talked about price yet, or if you haven't qualified, are you the decision maker? Or do you have to go to your boss, your boss's boss, or who's actually the one who's going to approve the budget? You need them to approve budget, and you need to know that they're a qualified buyer.
Yeah.
And that they're otherwise your win probability is just going to always be wrong. And it's going to be a frustrating experience. So,
yeah.
So I would keep your probabilities low until there's a point in your deal stages here where you've had that pricing discussion.
Yeah. So like maybe let's use this as an example, right? And of course, there would probably be some additional stages between this if we're talking about something like a SaaS company. But let's say you have one of those late stages where like you've gotten the verbal yes, you're literally just waiting for them to like approve the contract, whatever it may be. At that point, you may want to set a win probability higher, right? So maybe if you're in like a contract sent phase, for example,
90%,
yeah, you'd put that at 90% because you've got a really good, chance to actually close this deal, right?
Yeah.
Now, this, like setting up the deal stages is one thing. And this is like a pretty easy thing to do. Before we go and take a look at like how this changes things on the deal board and go look at the traffic analytics and stuff, for folks who are using Sales Pro, which is like the second tier level of HubSpot Sales Hub, there are like two lesser known but really, really cool features to kind of just talk about really quick here if you really want to get the most out of deal stages. There's two things you're seeing on this page. You'll notice when I scroll over all these different stages right here, on the right it says edit properties, okay? If you click on edit properties, this is underneath this update stage properties field here, what you can actually do is you can make it so that in order to advance to that stage, certain properties on that deal need to be filled out. So for example, if I move someone to the demo booked stage, or actually, no, we move to the contract sent phase, and we want to make sure that no matter what, there is an amount filled out, we can hit edit properties, choose amount, and then require it and hit next. What's going to happen here is if your sales rep tries to move a deal from demo booked to contract sent, HubSpot is going to make sure that they have that amount field filled in. And this goes for any other property, right? So if there's certain bits of information you have to collect going through the different stages of your sales process, you can force your sales rep to make sure they have that information in there before they can advance to that stage. So people are being very hygienic with their data and information input and stuff when it comes to moving people along the sales process. So that's one thing. The other one is this automation tab here. If you've had any experience with the workflows tool, which is HubSpot's like, flagship automation tool, if you will, what's really great here, and this is great for all you sales directors or sales managers that want to stay on top of what's happening with all the deals in your team's pipeline, you can basically build these different like micro workflows, I like to call them, that trigger certain things to happen between certain stages. So for example here, if you want to know when a deal gets to presentation scheduled, maybe you want to get like an email or a text or something like that, you can hit create workflow under this stage, and you can send an internal email notification to like one of the sales directors, for example, saying, hey, this deal moved to this stage. That way you don't have to be watching your deal board 24/7. You can just get a notification when you need it, right? Now, this is just an easy, quick way of setting it up in here. You can also do this just in the regular workflows tool as well. This is just giving you a much quicker way of doing it, and it shows you all your different automation for all your different stages on one page versus a bunch of different workflows separately in the workflows tool. So if you have Sales Pro, don't sleep on this. This is a really, really cool feature. A lot of people were asking for it for a long time. They implemented it. It's super cool. All right. Sweet.
Awesome.
Andy, before we move on to like now looking at what our deal board looks like, any other like, closing thoughts or ideas around deal stages before we move on?
No, I think this is great. This is a good frame up to be able to say, okay, this is how you march a deal down the field.
For sure. Cool. All right. So let's go ahead and save this here. So once you're done, go ahead and hit save. And just remember,
I do have one thing.
Yeah.
That's one thing. So let's say that you have a deal, and maybe you have a bunch of deals that stall out. They kind of they get down to, we got presentation scheduled, decision maker bought in, and they're just hanging there. We haven't gotten to the contract sent yet phase.
Yep.
And and they're becoming non-responsive. Maybe they just they got busy. Maybe their priorities changed. Who knows what? But they're just kind of like in no man's land.
Yep.
What do you recommend that you do at that point? Because that's you want to. Everybody's like, I got to get it to the next phase. Yep. Do you recommend putting them on a sequence? Do you recommend putting them into a category of a deal stage, like a purgatory kind of category or something? You're like, I can get out of jail card kind of thing. How do you get them out?
Yeah. So what to do with the stuck deals? I mean, so it really depends on kind of what your sales team's like policy is with that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to have some sales teams that say like, okay, you get stuck in a certain stage for X amount of time and they become unresponsive. How hard do we push to make that happen? right?
Mm-hmm.
The cool thing is with HubSpot, like you can easily set up workflows that can like look for that to happen, right? So deal reaches a certain amount, or sorry, deal reaches a certain stage, sits there for X amount of time, trigger some sort of action, like a reminder email to the prospect, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
even reminder emails to your sales reps to be like, hey, what's going on with this thing? Or maybe even some sort of notification to a sales director or a sales manager saying, this deal is stuck. Please go help your sales rep coach them through figuring this out, right?
Yeah.
You can do a whole number of different things. Definitely don't do nothing, right? But like there is so many creative ways that you can use automation to kind of push that through to the next stage. But again, it depends. Does that mean outward communication to the customer, or does that mean some sort of internal notification so people can help each other out? There's a number of different things that you can do there. Usually what I would recommend in those situations, though, is a sequence, right? For anyone who doesn't know what a sequence is a productivity tool in HubSpot. You can get it starting with Sales Starter, right? And essentially it allows you to manually trigger a series of automated emails that get sent to a prospect and tasks that get assigned to you to do certain things, right? And it's great for situations where either someone, for instance, ghosts you on a call and you want to get them to rebook with you. It's
Mm-hmm.
also great if you've lost touch with someone that you've been working with. Or for instance, if you want to like reconnect with a customer that you haven't talked to in a long time, or even introduce yourself for the first time. But
Mm-hmm.
sequences are made for one-on-one automated email communication, not mass email communication. I want to make that super clear too. And the best practice with sequences is to have a number of different sequences that your whole team has access to for any situation you can think of. For example, you'd want to have a specific sequence for customers that maybe are in that contract sent phase when you've sent the contract, but you haven't heard back from them, right?
Mm-hmm.
A certain amount of things have happened there. So you want that context in the body of those emails that are getting sent, right? Same thing if someone is just like, missed your first intro call, you want to have a specific sequence for that because you're going to say different things in those emails. So it's always best to get as many different situational sequences that can account for any of the different common scenarios that your team finds yourself in, and to leverage those, because those are just set it and forget it, right? I'm a sales rep. I notice that I'm in a certain stage. Someone's dropped off the face of the planet. Instead of perseverating all day on how I'm going to get back in touch with them, I rip them into a sequence. I let the sequence do its thing. If they get back to me, great. If they don't, it can set a task for me to say like, all right, this person hasn't responded from all these emails and the phone calls that you've made. Go ahead and lost the deal at this point, right?
Yeah.
You can even have workflows that say if a deal's been open for a certain amount of time and it hasn't been closed and it's in a certain stage, close the deal, right? Or tell the sales rep to think about closing the deal.
Mm-hmm.
You have all of the flexibility in the world. You're just limited by your creativity and how your team wants to go about with their standard operating procedures in certain situations, right? So there's no one answer. The answer is the sky's the limit. Yeah.
Right. What's interesting also, like it's always so hard to push a deal into close loss for for obvious reasons, right? You work on these deals and you don't want them to go there.
Yeah.
And what I've found is that you can have closed lost if you know for sure that it's closed lost, but you can also have closed lost-ish or something that is like, revisit this back. Just they're not responding. They go into this purgatory state, put them in add another deal stage to say, let's reach back out to them in 3 months, put a task on it so that you can reach back out in a month, 2 months, whatever. And try to revive them at that point. And those might be different than a hard closed loss, because a hard closed loss is like, I'm not going to do this. For sure, the deal is off. That's clear. If it's ambiguous and you want to still give it a chance, you may even create a deal stage for those kinds of deals.
Yeah. And to build off that even more, don't delete your closed loss deals. That your closed loss deals are a treasure trove of information that you can learn from, because you can see all of the emails back and forth, all of the calls notes, all the correspondence, literally every single step that went through that sales process. And you can go back and learn about why these deals aren't closing. You can even report on this. You'll notice here under this update stage properties thing that we were talking about earlier, by default, the close one reason and you can do a close loss reason too, can help you say, why did this deal close? Why did this deal lose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can set up different properties that help you kind of, measure why these deals aren't going through. So don't delete a deal just because it doesn't go your way.
That's
right?
a really good point.
Hold on to it so you can make use of that data. And also, when that customer resurfaces later on, just like you were saying, Andy, you've got all the correspondence from that previous engagement, and you can pick the conversation off where you left off, even if it wasn't you, that sales rep, working with them the first time, right?
That's right. Yep.
Don't delete your closed loss deals. Keep them in there, learn from them. Now, what I just realized is I hit the cancel button instead of save, so it reverted back to the other deal stages. That's okay. I think we've shown you all at this point how to actually change your deal stages, but we'll go through and kind of just, again, show you a couple things here. So now, that's how you edit your deal stages. Let's go back into sales for a second. Let's go to deals, right? Now, we talked earlier about how creating a deal should be like a conscious thing that a sales rep does, right? So how would we actually create a deal and get it to show up on here? Well, let's think about your sales rep's workflow, okay? And how they're actually like when they're on a call, what are they doing in HubSpot? What's actually happening here, right? So let's go find a contact. So I'm gonna go to contacts. We're gonna go take a look at, do I have my all contacts here? Yes, I do. Cool. So I've got fake Fred right here. Right now, if I am, fake Fred. Now, if I am a sales rep, okay, and I'm having a call with a customer, chances are I've come into here, I've hit log a call, and I'm taking notes on the call. Right. So from here, maybe we're having our first kind of reach out, after that person requested to speak to me. Maybe it's someone I got connected with. Really doesn't matter. We're having that phone conversation. They go, hey, yeah, I'd love to set up an intro call or set up a, whatever that first official part of the sales process is. And you as the sales rep go, okay, these people are serious. They're qualified. I should probably open up a deal at this point. How do you actually do that? What you're going to do is on the right-hand side, you'll see this little deals drop down right here, and you just click on add deal, right? From here, it'll bring up your little panel over here that'll have you fill in some information. So maybe you're filling this information in on the call. Maybe you're doing it after the call. Again, sky's the limit. It's totally up to you how you instruct your employees or your salespeople how to actually go through this. But once they fill out all this information here, I'm going to go ahead and hit create. And it actually builds the deal for us. And this deal is now showing up in this board, okay? Now, there's something that you need to know from a reporting standpoint in terms of when you open up a deal, okay? Well, remember here that I used this contact, fake Fred, as the contact that I used to open up this deal. One thing you should know from a reporting standpoint is that fake Fred's life cycle stage, once the deal has been opened, automatically moves to opportunity. All right. If you haven't figured out life cycle stages yet, I have a video on it on my YouTube channel. You can go check out. You can also look at, HubSpot's knowledge base about it. But an opportunity basically means this contact has an open deal currently, and we're trying to sell to them. It's the basic gist, right? Now, I call that out because what you'll also notice is if we let's say we go through the sales process with fake Fred, right? Fake Fred's like, yep, I want to buy all the stuff you have. And we're like, great, cool. As we're moving through these different deal stages, right? Eventually what we'll do is we'll get down to closed one, right? Now, closed one is basically saying, yeah, we've closed the deal. They're buying from us, whether we got the verbal or they gave us the credit card or whatever it may be. Your company has to define what a closed deal literally means. It's going to ask us here for the close one reason. Now, this is, again, just because it's set up by default, but this is a great example of what I showed you earlier in terms of those required deal stages. So just like I showed you earlier, if you wanted to make sure amount was in there at stage 2 or whatever it may be, you'll notice I moved it to close one, and HubSpot's forcing me to answer these questions or fill out these properties before I can do it, right? So close one reason is just the default, but I'm going to go ahead and say, they bought because he loved the pricing, right? cool. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Obviously, you can do something more advanced than that. That's just the basic one. But we've now said, okay, this deal is closed won, which literally means Fake Fred is now a customer. So if we go back and look at Fake Fred's opportunity, we might just have to refresh it here real quick. The life cycle stage automatically changed over to customer. Now, why is this important? Well, earlier, Andy, we were talking about reporting and seeing like which channels of your traffic or of your marketing efforts are actually producing the most customers. And keep in mind, I haven't set up anything custom here. This is still all completely out of the box. It's even more out of the box because I didn't even change the default records because I hit cancel instead. But if we go up to where it says reports, and then we go to analytics tools, and we go to traffic analytics, all right? Now, I have my like date and time stuff all kind of screwed up here, but what would happen here is if I had generated Fake Fred as a contact during this time frame that I have this filtered as, all right? Here in this traffic analytics report, you're going to see all the different sources of traffic that you could potentially get to your site, right? So direct traffic, which is people basically just either typing in your website or they're visiting your website and they have some sort of ad blocker on it. It's stripping out their tracking information. So we kind of have to bucket it under direct traffic. You've also got organic search, which is people Googling you and finding you through a result that's not a paid ad. You'll also see paid search as an option here. I only have like these 4 set up right now. So I don't really, not set up. I only have traffic coming from these 4 sources. So I don't see the other 4 that are here. But you'll see social media, paid social media, email marketing, for example, will show up here. Referrals are links from other websites, right? You can even see offline sources. So if you brought them in through an integration, like a Salesforce import or something, you'll see this in here. But what's cool about this is that not only do you see how many sessions you're generating from each one of these like general buckets, you see a conversion rate to how many of those actually become net new leads, which means they visited you from that source and then a brand new contact was created for them. But then you'll also see of those people who are generated in this time frame, how many of them actually turned into customers. All right. Again, I don't have this set up to reflect what we just did with Fred, but as your marketing team starts to generate more traffic and generate more leads, when your sales team takes those leads and actually closes them, it will basically attribute that new customer to whatever that source was, right? And now what's even cooler here is like, yeah, it's great that we can see the traffic coming from social media, but like that doesn't tell us Facebook, that doesn't tell us Twitter, that doesn't tell us Reddit or anything like that. If you drill down, you'll see all the same data broken down by the different sources within that source. So for example, here we see YouTube, Twitter. We'd also see Facebook and I don't know, Tinder. Well, I mean, not Tinder, but like, any other social networks, right? So and it'll break it down. You'll see that same data. So if you want to say, hey, I'm getting this many customers from YouTube versus this many from Twitter, why is that happening? And then you can kind of extrapolate that and figure out how to adjust your strategy. It'll show you that. But all your sales team needs to do is just do their own thing and close their deals within HubSpot or within Salesforce if you have the integration, and probably with some others now at this point. I'm just not familiar with them. And you will start to see which channels are generating the most traffic from you, as long as your salespeople are closing those deals on HubSpot. So it's pretty cool.
That is cool.
Andy, what are your thoughts thus far?
Yeah, this is great. This is super important, this view right here, because what this tells you is where are the activities coming from and where you either, if it's low activity, what you need to do to be able to boost that activity.
Yep.
That's one thing. Or if you've tried to boost that activity and it's just not successful, it's not a good channel for you, you want to know that so that you can reappropriate your budget and your time around channels that are performing, so you can double down on those.
Yeah.
So that's how I use this view.
Yeah. And I think there's always like, when you look at a number being high or low, right? I think you always have to have that conversation of, is like, does that low number mean we're going to pull resources away from it? Or does that low number mean we need to give it some more love, right?
That's right. Yes.
How do you help customers make that determination, right? Because it's like, maybe you're getting a lot of traffic from social, and like maybe you're getting, not a lot of traffic from some sort of like obscure social media site, but like you're getting some, like, how do you get that customer to be like, oh, well, we have to double down all of our efforts now on this traffic source just because it's low, versus like, when do you say, or we just don't focus on it? Like, how do you help people make that
Yeah, a lot of
determination?
times what happens is we'll talk to companies that are, they're a startup, right? And they don't have a huge following on social media yet. So, so the numbers are naturally going to be low. That doesn't mean, abandon social media. That means get behind it. So,
Yeah.
so what we'll do is look at what are some activities that we can do to support that initiative of getting behind social media. What does that actually mean? In some cases, it can mean reach out to your contacts. If you're a B2B business, for example, you may want to reach out to your contacts, and you can do this through LinkedIn messaging to say, hey, we've been colleagues for a long time. Would love it if you would be an ambassador for our business, and see if you can bring them in so that maybe you put them on an email list so that they can share articles when you post them to your blog, and they can share those out in social media. And through those different channels, we all have our own sphere of influence in social media. So if we can have this collective benefit of having a number of influencers or ambassadors to help get the word out there, that can accelerate the number of followers that we get in social media, and therefore those numbers will start to go up. That's a way that you can double down on that channel, for example, so that you can start putting some numbers on the board in social media, and then look at those supporting activities that get you there, that help do that, so that you can double down on that if it's working.
Yeah. And when you see that contact to customer rate start to spike and go up, that's like a pretty good indicator that that's a good channel that you should be really like putting a lot more effort into if like you're already seeing some success.
Yes, absolutely.
Very cool. Sweet. Yeah. All right, everybody. Anything else you wanted to go through, Andy?
No, this is great. This is a really good walkthrough of here's where you start, here's how you build your sales pipeline, how you think about it, how you assign different deal stages and close rates to them, the value of those deals, so that you can look at your forecast and then tie that to the traffic sources that are generating the deals in the first place. So,
and the double beauty of it all is that we're using one piece of software to do all of this. Yeah. that's the wild thing that sometimes I think with HubSpot is like a little easy to overlook, right? Yeah. It's like usually you'd be doing this across multiple tools, right?
And it's such a pain. It's fragmented, and then you get partial data and things slip through the cracks.
Yeah. So very cool. Awesome.
Love it.
Hope that was helpful, everybody. Andy, thank you for another fun conversation.
Thank you, man. I love these. Yeah,
these are great. I'll never, you know me, I'll never pass on an opportunity to nerd out on HubSpot. It's my favorite video game. Right.
Love it.
Cool. All right, man. All right. Sweet.
Thank you.
Very cool. Thank you, everybody. Cool. So yeah, let me stop the recording there. Why can I never find